Hello and welcome to the Women in Motorsports. My name is Joe Samyega, and with me we have Ben Schneider from Grid Life Encore and lastcar.info. Got plenty to talk about. Before we get into the action, a big thank you to our Patreon subscribers, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Once you sign up on Patreon, you'll get some Grid Network stickers. If you want some stickers but want to do a one-time investment, $10 or more through Super Chat or buy me a coffee. And if you're not watching us live, you see that little thanks button on YouTube. You could click on that. $10 more will send you some stickers and thank you on the air as well. And the simplest way to support us, hit the bell icon, subscribe to us right here on YouTube. We're getting so close to 1,000 subscribers. That'll be a tremendous day when we reach that milestone right here on the Grid Network. And Ben, we got to talk about NASCAR and especially Atlanta, that motor racing weekend. I know the Cup Series, that photo finish took the spotlight as a momentous moment that sport is just talking about. But we got to talk about the fact that it was out of all the series, Xfinity Series, that's where we had the one female racer, Hailie Deegan, in there. And for Hailie Deegan, I got to say, Saturday night under the lights, this is her first start here at Atlanta Motor Speedway since 2023 when the Truck Series came here. First laps for her, though, wasn't in the practice session. It was straight away in qualifying. Qualifying 19th for the race, which, considering it's a brand new team, the lack of laps they got logged at Daytona when they were out early, really just her second start with them, I would say it was fair, maybe a little bit good, so you're in the top 20 at Atlanta. But we discussed about this at the Daytona 500, that the concept of your first laps is qualifying for the Great American Race for Hailie Deegan and for the other drivers, especially the rookies. Does they find themselves in a predicament where they're at a disadvantage, where their first lap at Atlanta, which works like a super speedway, they call it draft pack racing track, does that put them at a disadvantage?
Well, Joe, it's funny that you bring this up as the first question because Hailie actually talked about this herself in her race vlog this weekend, and we'll play a short clip from that for you right now.
There's no practice at all. We're going right into qualifying. And so I was kind of like, man, like this is wild, very odd, especially for me and this being such a fast track.
Well, there you go. And I got to tell you, Joe, obviously I'm not a driver. But if I try to envision myself in such a situation, I think Denny Hamlin was talking about this on his podcast, and he's won, 50 some odd Cup races, arguably the best Cup driver in history to never win a championship. And he was saying something similar about Daytona last year. And then you take the Xfinity Series and drivers who, are significantly younger, significantly lacking the experience that somebody at that level does or has. And you're saying, we're going to take these drivers and put them on a racetrack that races very similarly to Daytona, very similarly to Talladega, that's a mile shorter, that is more narrow in the corners and on the straightaways, and we're going to throw them out there with 1 or 2 laps of qualifying, whatever it is, and then that's all they get before the race. Yeah, I think that's a massive disadvantage. It's a massive disadvantage not just for the rookies, but for anybody at this level who, unless it's maybe like a Justin Allgaier or somebody that, has kind of made a career out of this, or AJ Allmendinger, coming back after spending several years in Cup. The vast majority of the Xfinity Series field is either inexperienced compared to the Cup guys, or they don't have the budgets to compete at that level, or much more independent, maybe don't get nearly as much backing from the manufacturers or as much time in the sim to practice. So to not send them out, for qualifying without a single lap of practice. I mean, you heard it straight from the source, one of the drivers there in Hailie Deegan. I think it's a massive disadvantage, and I don't think it's setting the drivers up very well for the race itself.
I gotta say, as you mentioned, the race itself didn't seem to play out well at all. And probably that was a big factor because compared to last year in this race, Ben, we saw a lot of caution, a lot of people complaining about it. But this year, it was a very tamed event. But unfortunately, it wasn't because we saw good, long green flag racing side by side. But the freight train, the top lane, very hard to pass, very tricky. So how could NASCAR, the Xfinity Series, really expect the drivers to put on a good race when they only qualify? That's their laps, and you don't want to go out there and make a risky move and lose it.
Yeah, I think it's always, this question always comes up, and sometimes we talk about how it was kind of ridiculous how much practice we had back in the day. I don't know that we need to go back to that level of practice or anything, but I do think there needs to be a medium between an excessive amount of practice, which continues to cut into the team's budgets and everything. And I understand that the economy's tight right now; people are trying to save money, but I think there needs to be an alternative between that and what we're doing right now, where we're just sending drivers out with no practice at all. I don't think that that's the solution. Sometimes I think, if it's a different type of racetrack, maybe sending drivers out without practice can maybe improve the quality of the racing because everybody's, on a more level playing field. But in a case like this, a track that, we've only been going to a couple of times under this configuration, in a series like this, where, like I mentioned, a lot of the drivers are rookies or younger drivers who are more inexperienced than you might see in the Cup Series field. I don't know what you're expecting, in terms of trying to improve the quality of the racing without practice. I don't think that that's the intent, but sometimes people make that argument. And, at a track like this, everybody's trying to figure out how the track races in a pack and what their cars are capable of. I think you saw it. I mean, I was very concerned for the Cup Series race on Sunday. And of course, it turned out we got one of the best races arguably in modern NASCAR the last several years, and one of the greatest finishes of all time. But the Xfinity Series, we didn't get that. We got mostly single file parade, not a lot of passing, not a lot of action. Jesse Love, to his credit, put the car on pole, but much of the race was up there leading, and nobody really seemed to be willing to make a move to try to challenge him, and were unable to challenge him. So it was a completely different kind of race that we saw, despite it being the exact same track. And, I think part of that is probably because drivers, weren't too comfortable with their cars because they didn't get any practice time. They just got one hot lap of qualifying, and then they were setting their cars and ready to go race. So I think that you need more than that for drivers to be comfortable enough to take those risks and make those moves when it comes time for the race.
100%. If you're not comfortable with the car, if you feel like you don't have the handle for it, you're not going to be aggressive. Maybe on the last lap, but even then, fairly tamed race overall. For Hailie Deegan, it just seems she wasn't exactly up to speed with the car, fell 2 laps down, finished 27th place. And this is where it's starting to get a little bit worrisome, I would say. Unable to lead laps, but we know the situation. You're just thrown out there. You did qualifying laps, now you're in the race. So she didn't lead any laps, didn't collect any stage points. And right now, considering the poor resort at Daytona, 34th in the point standings. Now, Ben, there are better situations Hailie Deegan could be in compared to where she is right now, because 34th in the standings, there is no charter system. So the standings, the way it works for the starting lineup, 33 starting spots based on speed. Then you have 4 essentially provisionals based on the owner point standings, and 1 additional spot for a provisional, like a champion's provisional. So how concerning could it be for qualifying for this new team and Hailie Deegan?
Yeah, well, it's somewhat of a new team. Obviously, AM Racing raced last year. The 25 car, we're expecting to see it at some point this season. Originally, I think they were planning to run 2 full-time cars. Those plans fell through. So the 25 owner points from last year actually transferred over to Hailie Deegan's 15 this year. So she has those. I don't know off the top of my head. I know it used to be the first 5 races back in the top 35 days in NASCAR Cup when you use the old or the previous season's owner's points, and then you transfer over to the new one. So I don't know how. I would imagine you could at least go through this weekend at Las Vegas. I feel like maybe it might be after the 3rd race. I've got to admit, I don't know that off the top of my head. But at some point, of course, it's going to revert to the current owner points. And, obviously, if weather is an issue, and, goodness knows we've certainly had a lot of weather-impacted races in NASCAR over the last year or so, that could certainly be a concern. Or, even if it's not, if you don't put down a good enough qualifying lap, if you're that low in points, you're obviously not going to be able to fall back on one of those provisional spots. So, of course, it's still early, and I would expect Deegan to go out and have a much better race at Vegas than she had Daytona, Atlanta, considering that this is a track where she's going to for the 2nd time. Of course, her one start in 2022 was here. She finished 13th and had a very solid debut. So I'd imagine she's coming into this weekend full of confidence and hopefully can, maybe if she doesn't even set the world on fire and get a top 10 or a top 5 or anything, she can at least have a solid result that will move her up the point standings to the point where that's not a concern going into the rest of the year.
That's the big key. Try to gain those points so that way it becomes less and less of a concern if you're higher up in the owner stands. For Las Vegas, there's 38 teams on the entry list, so qualifying for the race will not be an issue unless there's a very late addition. Now, Las Vegas, very different to Daytona, Atlanta, where many call draft pack racing tracks, where sometimes luck is a big factor. Las Vegas, this weekend, I think will truly indicate where everyone stands in qualifying. I got to ask you, though, Ben, when it comes to last year's race, we saw 4 cautions only. Long green flag runs, except for 2 cautions for single car spins in turns 3 and 4 area, then the stage breaks. Would that type of race where you have the long green flag runs benefit Hailie Deegan and her team, or could that be a setback?
Honestly, I would say long green flag runs, it might decrease the chance of a lead lap finish if she can't hold pace with the leaders or something. But the way I see it, you're not learning very much running caution speed behind the pace car. I would think for her, she would want to get as many green flag laps as possible, get as much race experience as possible. So, long green flag runs and, maybe even getting a chance to practice a green flag pit stop if it goes long enough in the last stage. I think that would probably be more of a benefit to her than, arguing that maybe it was a setback because you finished a lap or 2 down. It's only going to be her 4th career start in this series. She's still trying to gain the experience and learn where that team's program is at before we get into the heart of a season here in a month or 2. So I think for a race like this, again, going back to a track where she's, had a solid run before in her debut a couple of years ago, I think she should absolutely want to get as many green flag laps as possible, and a long run would probably be best.
I think the green flag runs, as you said, gain those lap times down. The practice getting used to the car will be great. But as you mentioned as well, too, if she's not up to speed with that car, it could be a long day, potentially fall a lap down, maybe catch the free pass during a stage caution. But overall, I think the big thing for her, finish the race, log the laps, because as you said, still very early in her career. This is the first time we're not at Daytona or Atlanta. This is really an opportunity for that team to shine, I think. See what they could do with Hailie and hopefully get the team going in the right direction, points-wise and finish-wise. Now, one driver, Ben, who's going to be in Phoenix and is looking to get everything going back again after a bit of a setback in 2003, made some big news. And we got to really talk about, I think, one of the drivers to watch in Phoenix in the ARCA race.
That's right, Joe. Isabella Robusto is back. She's going to be making her ARCA debut at Phoenix next week in the combo race between the main ARCA Menards Series and the season opener for the ARCA Menards Series West. Now, she re-upped with Toyota in a multi-year deal, and Toyota, of course, has been very supportive of her during her driver development. She'll be driving with the top Toyota team in ARCA, Venturini Motorsports, and racing alongside Tony Breidinger and Amber Balkan, who are both full-time this year. So that'll be 3 female drivers in the race total for Venturini, equaling a record that they set for themselves in 2018. So, Joe, how big will this be for Robusto finally getting to make her debut? She, of course, was supposed to run some races in the ARCA East Series and main ARCA Tour last year, and then her concussion really threw her schedule for a loop. What are you expecting from her if she finally gets to do that this upcoming weekend at Phoenix?
Well, on the track, what I'm expecting from her, go out there, get the hang of the car, understand the track. Granted, we have the simulators and everything to try to get up to speed, but really just try to take down notes, find some marks, so that way as you're hitting your marks, getting faster and faster. Approach this like you would anytime if you're a rookie, first time out there. Qualifying? That's where I'm really going to be curious what the teams are going to do. Are they going to want to put a setup there to try to go for the front row, or something a little bit more where, okay, we just want Isabella to go out there, have a good solid 2 laps, feel comfortable with a little bit of a looser car. So if we're a little bit front half mid-pack, that's fine with us. And then for the race itself, it's really race your own race. Just go out there, log the laps. If we get the long green flag runs, that could help you just get the hang of the car. But she's going to be in really good equipment. So I know there's going to be a lot of people anticipating she needs to be up front. If she's in top 10 position, I would say that is great. Awesome work considering everything she went through in 2023. But if she is struggling, I mean, this is going to be essentially first time. I think that's going to be okay. Phoenix is one of those tracks where it's a short track. It's very unique, especially with how a lot of drivers like to use that dogleg as a shortcut. I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, but overall, I think it's going to be really interesting what she does, and to see her making her debut, long overdue because of missing out. Essentially, I believe it was in Nashville the week after she got injured. I think it's just going to be really great to see her on the track, and for her to be back on track on the racetrack and with her driver development program, that has to feel pretty good. Big thing though, bringing it home in one piece, the car.
Yeah, well, that's the most important thing, of course. And I think a top 10 would be absolutely incredible, but have to be realistic as well at the same time with the expectations. And I'm expecting a pretty solid entry list, considering will be not only the main ARCA Menards series that's going to be there, but also the West series and all those regulars with their season opener. So we'll see what Robusto can do at Phoenix next week. But in the meantime, let's talk about kind of what set her back last year. And unfortunately, Joe, like you mentioned, a miserable 2023 for her after that accident at Hickory. Really sidelined her for pretty much the entire rest of her season. She said it was a very frustrating experience for her. She also put out a pretty heartfelt social media post at the end of the year and mentioned something that was very interesting to a lot of people. According to the National Institute of Health, the female brain exhibited 1.5 times greater chance of being cognitively impaired following concussion compared to the male brain. And of course, the National Institute of Health is under the federal government Health and Human Services. So, Joe, we haven't talked about this as much with female athletes and concussions. We talk a lot about the issue in the NFL. Obviously, that's an all-male sports league, and it's subject to come up in motorsports a lot of times as well, which is very male-dominated. So the experience that Isabella went through last year, should that cause motorsports to re-examine safety protocols, particularly during a time where we're seeing more women, particularly at a younger age as well, getting involved in trying to find a career in this sport?
Absolutely. I think it has to make the conversation pivot to not just so much focusing on the male brain, the male athlete, but the female brain, both genders, because at the end of the day, we are seeing more female athletes come into motorsports. So we got this research now that's showing that there is a bit of a difference. I think it's a good opportunity, whether it's NASCAR, even IndyCar, Formula One, especially Formula One, they're going to have F1 Academy. Start looking into, okay, what ways could we greatly reduce the chances of a concussion? Because we know big thing is the hard crashes, the hard impacts. The sports, especially the major sports levels, have taken the steps. We got the safer barriers, the Hans device, the seats pretty much cocoon the driver, so there's not a whole lot of opportunity for them to move their head back and forth. But we still see hard crashes here and there. We could still have some more development when it comes to the safety features of the cars. Looking at the tracks, I know, for example, a lot of people find it very controversial, the sausage curbs, how to launch a car. That could be a big impact and could potentially cause a concussion. Look at, could we remove those? What can we do? Because at the end of the day, nobody wants to see their favorite driver sidelined with concussion symptoms. I mean, with Kurt Busch's career, unfortunately, coming to an unplanned end, that was really hard. And I think it really drives the point that regardless, the work has to continue, but I think we have to expand to all the genders now. You can't just focus on the male brain. You got to look at the female brain too, because of the difference. And the other thing too, I got to say too, the short tracks, your local home tracks, we know a lot of them still have concrete walls. They don't have safer barriers. They might try to have improvised ways to have a safer wall. We've seen sometimes some of them will have a foam pad. When somebody hits it, you got foam all over the place. Because Hickory, legendary short track, big impact, late model cars, they have a lot of safety aspects, but not exact same level as the higher up series. I think it's just something all motorsport series need to look into safety, but especially when it comes to concussion research, all genders need to be included now.
Joe, I just want to read what she put out on New Year's Eve on her Instagram and talking about her experience last year. She said, April 22nd, my world spun out of control, literally last lap, just past the white flag. I should have won, but instead, in a split second, I lost 8 months of my season and my life. Concussions aren't supposed to be this bad. Our cars and equipment keep us safe. Everyone's back in the car after a week, maybe 2, sometimes a little longer. And this was my first one, so how bad could it be? Well, mine was different. No matter how hard I worked or how hard I rested or how many doctors I saw, recovery seemed like it would never come. But why? While talent doesn't have a gender, the severity of a concussion can. Because of differences in our neuroanatomy and endocrine systems, females can have a much different outcome to traumatic brain injuries than males, directly affecting our severity and recovery. There are so many more factors involved than I ever knew. There is very little research on this, but it's real. So I want to share my story to help others understand. I'm so grateful and thankful for my amazing support system, my family and friends, and the best team ever at TRD and Toyota Racing for providing me the best resources, surrounding me and believing in me and never giving up on me. And to all my fans that sent prayers and love and patiently stuck by me, thank you. This year will not be lost. I've learned so much outside of the car, and it's priceless. So now it's time to put it all together. Everyone asks, are you back? Are you 100%? Yes and yes. My new normal is a little different now, but I'm as hungry and driven as ever. I have a season to make up and a lot to prove. So long, 2023. It's time for a new year. And that new year has already started. She's been doing some late model stuff, but she will finally get that chance to make her ARCA debut at Phoenix here in about a week and a half. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what she can do. I've heard a lot of great things about the work that she's been putting in on the late model side of things. And I think a lot of people are expecting great things from her in the coming years. And thankfully, she took this issue seriously and didn't try to rush it back. Yeah. And I think that she's going to be all the better for it. And hopefully, we'll see some great things from her behind the wheel of the ARCA car in 2024.
Yeah, very excited to see her behind the wheel of the car again. Of course, we'll be recapping her in a couple of weeks' time. Next week, a big show where we're going to preview the first race of F1 Academy in Saudi Arabia. So be sure to subscribe to us right here on the Grid Network so you don't miss any of that coverage, and hit the bell icon so that way you are notified when we're on the air. Also, be sure to visit gridranking.com. Matthew has his latest NASCAR article up there recapping the Atlanta and Better Health 400. Encourage you to check out, and we're going to be having coverage all year long. Be sure to subscribe to us on our Patreon. Colin Show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew invest in us each and every month. They got their stickers in the mail. And if you want to get stickers, go to our Patreon, invest in the Grid Network, or a one-time Buy Me a Coffee YouTube Super Chat, or the YouTube Thanks button. $10 or more, we'll send you some stickers. And, of course, a busy race weekend we have. Essentially, Grid Live pre-race. We're going to be a little bit late due to the F1 race being early. Then we're going to have the wrap-up show on Sunday. Then Grid Encore, Ben, Brandon, they're going to be on the air. And then we're doing it all over again, it seems. Going to be previewing the IndyCar season, Grid tonight, and going forward for 2024. And we'll be, at that point, less than a month away from the Grid ranking Week 1 standings. For Ben Schneider, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.